Alright, hi. So, I'm SupahFly. I'm going to be going through my really early predictions and tier list, power rankings for Overwatch League Season 3. This super scuffed version. Just set this up real fast so I can run through and get my predictions out there. See how close we get at the end of the season. So, I'm going to do what I can to try and keep this video really short. I'm going to run through each of the teams. I'm going to try and keep it as quick as I can so this isn't like a crazy long ranty video. So I think like the easiest way to start, we have this set up, so usually it's like S, A, B, C tier, but I kind of want to do it like in order because that kind of determines how teams actually rank up against each other. It's easier to put in tiers, but some teams are just flat out better than others, even if you put them in the same tier. But the way I divided it up for seedings, so you have 1 and 2, those are your like division leaders. So these are guys that I predict are going to be finishing first, second seed overall in the season. 3 through 6 is your playoff teams. So those are the guys that don't have to go to play-ins. 7 through 12 is going to be play-in teams. And then 13, 17 is like in the hunt but just don't quite make it. Teams that finished kind of like how Valiant and Paris did last year. And then 18 and 20 are like the F-tier teams, the teams that just did not look good that season. So I'm going to just run through real fast. I think the easiest way to start is just kind of fill out the ones that are kind of gimmies that make the most sense. So obviously I'm going to put Shock number 1. I think they're going to be the strongest in their division. No one's really going to give them much of a run. Like, there's going to be a couple good teams still coming out of the Pacific, but looking at it, I don't think any of them are going to be quite as good as Shock. And to round out the bottom, I think it's pretty fair to put Boston on bottom. They just look like they aren't quite, their core doesn't look that strong. Like each team has their core, and you look at Boston's core and you'd say that'd probably be like fusions and color hex. That doesn't really stand out to a lot of the other teams what they're building around. They got Myeonbong, which looks really good, but some of the other pieces on there just don't look like they're gonna be able to stand up. So I think it's pretty comfortable to put them in 18 and 20. The other team that I want to put there would probably be Valiant. I'm willing to put Valiant above Boston if it'll let me here. But I think Valiant's got a little bit higher of a ceiling. I like some of the players on the team. I really like Lastero. I was kind of waiting for him to be a pickup. I think he could be like a real sleeper player headed into Season 3 that can really surprise a lot of people. So I'm kind of excited to see like how some of these guys will show up, and maybe we get like a Season 1 Boston kind of thing. I doubt it, but if anything, you can see some of these guys have just an incredible season, get Rookie of the Year or something cool like that, and they get moved to a better team where they can actually contend for a title. If we're looking at, again, just bouncing back up here, just kind of looking through these different teams. If we're looking at the East, I think there's really only 2 other teams that I would say could contend for 1 or 2, and it really comes down between New York and Atlanta. So one of these teams is going to have to drop down to these. And that's kind of hard to decide. New York had kind of a weird stretch. It looks like they figured out that their roster looked best with Sabiolbi in. Even though the talent was probably better running Nene and Libero, Sabiolbi is just like a really good leader for this team. So the team looked like mentally their strongest when Sabiolbi was in there for them. And Atlanta's made a lot of big changes. All of them look pretty good. It's going to be kind of hard to tell if we're going to go Pogpo or Gator, and then if we want to do FRD or Hawk. I think Gator Hawk might be the best tank duo to put out there. I don't really see, you probably do like Pogpo Hawk. I don't really see FRD over Hawk in this lineup. So, and then of course you got Edison, you're going to have Erster. Like, this looks like this could be a pretty solid team. Dogman, we don't know how well he's going to stack up. He looks like, yeah, I would still put him top 10 flex supports. Looking at, as of last year, I would probably put him top 10. I don't really know how it's going to shake up this year. But the big questions for these 2 teams for me is how well is Gator and Hawk going to stack out to the rest of the league? And over here, if Meko is, they're losing much talent with Meko leaving the team and pick him Hotba instead. And then of course you don't have Flower anymore, but he didn't really play that much. But then you got Who Are You, which could be a really interesting pickup. The bigger thing is I don't know how you're going to work in Saviolbi with what could be the meta. It looks like it could be a lot of Mei and Hanzo, in which case it seems like Nene and Libero would be like your best duo to put out there. But there's just a lot less concerns and question marks about New York, which is why I'm going to want to put Atlanta in the 3 to 6 tier. Although they probably finished 3 or 4 overall. That seems like a pretty safe bet for them. They have a really strong damage core. I like their supports, and I think their tanks have really good potential. Let's take a look at some of these other teams here. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about Vancouver for a second. I think Vancouver, even with the change they made, there's no way they drop out at the top 6. Like, this is still a really solid team. I've seen Plaid chat, and they talked a little bit about Haxel, and maybe he isn't as flexible as we thought. He still looked really good on pretty much everything he played. He did real on Genji, even though they were trying to push like a weird Genji strat in stage 4. He was one of probably the best Brig, honestly, in GOATs, even though that's not really a factor anymore with how the 222 lock has happened. Obviously, you have some things that are going on with Fisher, and what if he doesn't even make it to the end of the season? This guy could retire before All-Stars, but there's still like an abundance of tanks out there that's you could still pick up. Like, why not bring back Tizzy, or try and find someone else that you might be able to make use of? And I think what could happen is you could see some of these teams that have like a really good tank on the bench, or they just have 2 tanks on their team that they're willing to ship one out to a team like Vancouver. So you could see maybe Shanghai move stand 1 now that they have Fearless, and that could be a suitable replacement for Fissure if he ends up bouncing halfway through the league. So I'm going to leave Vancouver up here. I think they're still pretty solidly a top 6 team. Also, in my top 6 teams, I'm willing to put Philadelphia here. Fury's like a huge pickup. I really liked Poco on that team, but I mean, if you have a chance at Fury, I think you got to go for it, because Fury's easily like the best off tank in the league right now. So that's a pretty big pickup. Keeping Carpe EQO is good. Hopefully these guys aren't washed. I really like watching those two play. I really hope we get to see Carpe and EQO in their original form in Season 1 when they carried Philadelphia all the way to the finals. I mean, there was a lot of other stuff that was happening there, like Neptuno and Boombox are playing really well, but now we got a different lineup for Philadelphia. Alarm could be really big. He's getting hyped up a lot. I think he deserves it. Like, he looks like really good when he was on Fusion Uni. So he could be on the same tier as Jonak and Twilight and Violet. And Funny Astro, I'm kind of looking forward to see like in a consistent starting position, as opposed to just the 1 or 2 maps he's played for Atlanta last season. The little bit he's been on British Hurricane, I kind of want to see how he functions in this. But just kind of looking at this, obviously the biggest concern would be Sato, but I think now that the team has kind of changed, they got a new coaching staff in there, I think Sato has better potential to pop off on this team. So I'm pretty confident saying that this team could be like top 4, top 5. Probably will be about as good as Gladiators were last year, maybe about as good as Hangzhou. Speaking of Hangzhou, I think that's the last team I'm going to want to try and sneak into my top 6 here, but I'm definitely put them number 6 overall. They haven't really made any changes. They look like pretty much the same team that's coming out this time, aside from they just kind of cut off some of the different weight of the roster. The biggest thing that we need to be looking at, they did pick up Coldest. I liked Bebe. He seemed pretty good. Coldest has potential to be really good, though, so he could definitely get worked into that starting roster, and that might be able to give him a bit of an edge to make that push for the top 6 and maybe try and sneak their way past some of these other teams. And then, of course, we get, like, there's a question mark about Adora, if he's still the starter. He was pretty good, but he doesn't quite stack up to the guys in his position that are also in this same tier. But looking at the rest of the team spread here, I think it's pretty easy to say that Hangzhou should be top 6. So the other team, though, that I think could get pretty sneaky, that we should be looking out for, would be Guangzhou. Guangzhou's made a couple different changes. I think Hanbo's a bit of a loss for them, but you could see Krong looks like he could be pretty good. I liked watching him, the little bit I saw of Korean contenders. And, of course, Happy and Nero, that looks like a pretty solid duo, honestly. So this team could get kind of sneaky, but even with how they did in Stage 4, they were kind of on the upswing, but they still got kind of whomped in the playoffs, even when they started to look at their strongest. So, they got whomped by Seoul, who got boomed on by who they played first. It was Vancouver. So, I've heard a lot of good things about Guangzhou. I think they are going to be good. I think they could potentially be better than any of these three teams and find their way in the top 6. But right now, just looking at, I think Guangzhou's pretty easily a 7 team. Let's see. Moving forward, so this is kind of tough here. I think for 8th seed, it's either Seoul or Shanghai. I think I want to go Shanghai because I really like that they brought Fearless back for this roster. There's going to be a really interesting damage rotation between Fleta, Ding, DM, and Lip, I believe, was the last guy that got brought on. He looked pretty good when they were doing the Shanghai Masters, or whatever that tournament was called, between the Chinese teams. So Fearless looked good the little bit he played, but it was obvious there's a lot of like communication issues that were happening. So hopefully, like in this environment, he can play a lot better. We can see more of him. This kind of resolves a lot of like the things that people were wondering about Stand 1, that he might not show up as well. That it seems like a good roster. He's the only thing that can hold him back. Fearless is probably better than Stand 1. When I watched Stand 1 a little bit in NA Contenders, he didn't really stand out to me. He didn't look like anything super special. So I think Fearless is a pretty good move here. But I'm not, again, they have Coach Moon as their head coach. I liked Blue Has. I thought he did really well for them last year. So it's weird that he moved on. But Coach Moon, if you remember, he was the head coach for Valiant when they went 0-7. But he was also head coach for Valiant when they finished number 2 overall and won the Pacific Division Season 1. So, I don't know. I see some people that are putting Shanghai in the top here, but I think they're going to be pretty close to where Hangzhou, Guangzhou, and Shanghai are all going to end up. Maybe Vancouver's even in that mix too. But these teams are all pretty close. I think, even though I've said it, where it's 3-6, 7-12, so playoffs, play-ins, I think these is all going to be pretty tightly contested. If I remember, like, Season 2, like, all these spots were within, like, 2 games of each other. So, it's pretty tight. I could definitely see Shanghai moving up. So, I think you could even make a case, looking at this now, I'm willing to make Shanghai number 7, and we might revisit, might swap around Shanghai, Hangzhou. The more I'm looking at this, I didn't script any of this coming in. I got all the logos here. I'm just putting them wherever I feel kind of stream of consciousness right now. So we're going to see how this might change. I'm almost talking myself into putting Shanghai over Hangzhou here, actually. Let's move on. I think we're going to have to put Seoul. This would be 7, 8, 9, number 9 seed here. So they'd be playing the first round play-ins. It's really just a matter of how hard can Profit and Gesture carry this team. Badoshin is a pretty good move here. Toby will hopefully, he's one of my favorite players. I hope that he has another good season, but he might be on one of his last seasons here in the Overwatch League, which is kind of sad to say, but it's kind of rough for Seoul that they might need to find another guy to start over him. And then, of course, you have the question at damage, where you have, what is it? They have Fitz and Illicit now that you're going to be starting with Profit. That doesn't really look like that's going to be able to complement him too well. So, Seoul, this seems about the range they'd be good in. They're going to win some cool games. They're going to lose some bad games. But finishing just above 500 sounds about right. Let's see. Let's go ahead. Let's put, so it'd be number 10 would be the next team. And I have a lot of teams that I think, this is going to be pretty tight, actually, 10 through like 15. So there's a number of teams. Let's go ahead and let's add a row down here so we can show all our teams that I think are about going to be close to each other. It's going to be Gladiators. It's going to be Houston and Defiant, I think, are the 3 that you're going to look at as this could be filling out this. But the question is, what order would they come in here? Because we're looking at 9, 10, what would this be? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'd probably say we can sneak these 3 as the last play-in teams. But the question is, what order they go in. If you were to try and put them, I want to give Gladiators the edge just because that tank line looks pretty solid, and they put a lot of money into that, getting OG and space. So it'd be kind of disappointing if they finish any lower than like 10th or 11th, which is still a huge drop off because they finished, I believe it was number 4 overall last year. But it makes a lot of sense because you have Bird Ring starting, then you have Jaru and Mir as the other two. And Mir could pop off. Mir could be actually really good for this team, but we haven't seen enough of him, or at least I haven't, to really say if that would be a good enough pickup and to really fill kind of the gap that was left by Surefour and Hydration leaving the team. Looking at these other two teams, I want to say it's going to be Houston can be better than Defiant here, mostly because Houston has some good moves. I still like Muma. I do think Muma's still really good. Meko's a really good off-tank that really plugs a lot of the holes that they had. They filled out a lot of stuff. Hydration's going to be moving around between damage and tank. You still have Blase. Jake's gone, but hopefully Linkster can do well. You still have Dante. Dante was probably the best player on that team last year. And now you have Repel and Jexay as the starters for supports. Assuming they're going to be starting, because Rockets and Boink are still there, so you don't know exactly how they're going to do it. But Jexay didn't look great on Soul. Like, he was pretty good, but wasn't as good as he was hyped up to be. So it wasn't surprising that Soul let him go and decided to run with Toby. So the question here is he going to be better on Houston? Is he going to be worse? Is he going to be about the same that we've seen? And of course, if their starting lineup, so let's say, for instance, the starting lineup would be Dante, Hydration, Muma, Meko, Repel, and Jexay. That's 3 and 3, so 3 Americans and 3 Koreans. Now you gotta wonder about communication issues. Are those guys gonna have a hard time communicating? Is there gonna be a big language barrier that's holding them back? It seems that the best way to do a mixed roster is 4 and 2. So you have either 4 players that speak the same language and 2 that speak a different language, or, well, I mean, it would be either way. So like you could do 4 Koreans and then 2 Americans, or vice versa, or 2 Westerners. But then you want to try and keep it in roles. Having both your supports as Koreans is good because they can communicate a lot easier and quicker about how to peel for each other and what to do to really coordinate. Same thing with tanks when they're trying to decide like who to dive on, who to go for. Having no language barrier to worry about and just being able to talk fluently with each other, that saves like just a couple seconds, which can mean anything. And it can really define how a team plays. And when you are trying to play and you're losing and you're unable to just say what you want because of a language barrier, that really kind of hurts the team's mental. So Houston, I think, is going to end up being good and find their way into the play-ins, but they might start off like really slow. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the first 10 games are below 500. But then they can probably figure it out. I think Harsh is probably the best coach that they could have that's available to help them with a multilingual roster. Especially, don't forget that Houston is a team that was primarily Western in the first place. They had only 1 Korean. So they were coming pretty much entirely in English. So this is going to be weird for that team to try and change their approach, to try and go multilingual. And then I'm going to put Defiant as the last one here, because just kind of looking at what's left, I would say Defiant is probably the best of them, or has the highest potential. I think Logix is really good. I really like Kareev. Surefour, obviously, is going to, like, I've heard Surefour and Logix, what they're probably going to do is their starters for damage. But then you have Agilities and Mangachu on the bench that you can rotate in. There's talk about Pharah being really good right now, that a lot of teams are scrimming with Pharah. And they have 2 good Pharah players on their bench now that they can rotate in for that. Then, obviously, the biggest thing to look at is how good our Beast and Nevic's going to be. And I think if you were to stack them up against all the other starting tanks in the league, I would pretty confidently put them around this range, 11, 12, 13 ranked overall between them, where they can beat the guys that aren't as good as them, and they're not going to do as well against these guys. So I'd see them finding their way into the last spot of play-ins and probably getting bounced in the first round. All right, let's take a look 13 through 17. These are the teams that are just going to miss out. They're just short. I think right now we're going to want to probably put... It's going to be pretty close, I think, between these two teams. I think they made a couple good moves that'll try and tie things together. Gangnam Jin's a really good pickup for Mayhem. That really kind of plugs another hole that they needed. the one that you gotta look at right now is Gargoyle that good? Because he was really good in Goats playing Zarya, but Goats isn't around anymore. And then he was good at Hog, but pretty much every off tank is good at Hog, so that's not super special. So we haven't seen a Sigma yet. And I like Gangnam Jin. He looks really good. Washington's made some weird pickups, but don't want to ride this high too much of Corey and Stratus. I think that tank line could be really weird for them. Like, how are you going to run that? Is it going to be Lulshish and Elivote? Are you going to try and put Roar in there somehow? It seems like they put a lot of money into tanks, but with no real rhyme or reason for why they want those tanks on that team. So I don't really know who's starting for Washington. So I think I'd pretty confidently put these guys here. Chengdu I'd probably put next. They'd be close to these guys. In fact, I would probably be willing to say Chengdu might even be better than Justice and Mayhem even. Just because I think Jinmu's really good, Leave is really good. They could probably muscle their way into one of these spots. But I don't see them as making the moves that they needed to really get themselves competitive. Ameng is great as like a player rep kind of guy. He's the guy that you really enjoy watching, but he doesn't seem like that guy that you need as your anchor to get you into the real competitive tiers. Next, I'm going to slide in Dallas right here. I'm not sold on Dallas yet. I think that this is the team that they're going to miss out again on playoffs this year, and they're just going to realize that they have to blow it up. They're going to have to reset and whole new core and everything. Let all their guys go and try it again. Decay is pretty big. Doha is pretty big. But I don't quite know if I'm ready to trust in this team. I like Gamsu. Gamsu's probably one of my favorite players in the league right now. I think, note, his stocks have gone way down since Season 1. He doesn't look quite as good. We haven't seen too much of a Sigma. I believe he played a little bit of Sigma in World Cup, but we all know who Canada did, so wouldn't really want to take that as really promising there. So I am a little bit concerned about, I think Dallas is sticking to a core that hasn't really worked for them before. They picked up some interesting guys, so they could move up a little bit, but I'm not too confident in them, and I think if they don't do well this season, they end up in this tier, then they need to let their guys go. They need to keep the 3 best players on that team, if that, maybe just 1 or 2, and they might need to clear out some of the front office as well. Let's see, we got one more team for each tier. So the question is, who's going to be better? Is it going to be London or is it going to be Paris? I think I'm going to put Paris here because our guy Sparkle is going to be too young for majority of this league. I think Paris could be that team that was like Shock Season 1, where they're just going to be trash for a majority of the season, but they're building towards the future. They're not drafting or signing Sparkle now for this season, because he obviously can't play. That's a bigger pickup for Season 4, when he can play all season, and then they can start to build around him. So look to see a couple different pickups that are going to try and benefit how they want to play with Sparkle. So Z and Hanbin are pretty big for that. Having Rush as their coach obviously means a lot, but I don't think that's enough to really get them through a lot of the struggles they had last season. So they could jump up. They could jump up here. I don't see these guys coming into play-ins at all, but I think that next season, if they continue making good moves to try and build around Sparkle and help out Coach Rush to really enable him, then they're definitely in this tier, and maybe depending on their pickups could make it up to here. But this season, I don't think so. London's gonna have to be the last one here. Obviously, they just completely blew up the roster, started all over again. Looks like they're going full budget, except for Glister. Glister's really good. I liked Glister a lot, watching him play for Gen G. So I think that he's gonna be the really bright spot on that team. And it could be kind of a situation with Valiant, where hopefully some of these guys are just going to pop off real big, and they can get some nice contracts head into Season 4 and play for contending teams. Or London can figure out who their guys are from that team, the real diamonds in the rough, and try and build around them and make themselves back into a play-in or playoff team Season 4. But I do think London and Valiant are the most comparable, but I think London has the higher ceiling, in all honesty. So I'm going to put Boston last here, looking at Valiant. London, I'm pretty confident putting number 17. So let's just go ahead and run through this real fast. The numbers 1 through 20, We'll read it left to right. So number 1, Shock. 2, New York. 3, Atlanta. 4, Philadelphia. 5, Vancouver. 6, Hangzhou. 7, ooh. I did say I might come back to this. This is a little bit tricky, isn't it? I think the Hangzhou coldest pickup is actually really good for them, the more I think about it. I like Shanghai. I think Shanghai can be really good. I don't want to see them in play-ins again, because I think they can compete with some of these guys. But how good is Fearless? I think Fearless is better than Stand 1, but he might not be enough of what they needed, because he took a year off, because he had some different issues, and he had to go back to Korea. Because I'm pretty sure Season 2... Shanghai was planning on starting with Fearless, and then he had his own personal issues and had to leave. So he sent him to Team CC, their academy team, and brought in Gamsu. Because that was like the last second before the season started, they brought in Gamsu. But I think Hangzhou might be more solid than Shanghai. Yep, I think I'm confident leaving it like that. So yeah, let's do... These are top 6. These are the teams that are making it to the playoffs. These are your play-in teams, so that means Shanghai, Guangzhou get your first-round byes. And then Seoul play Toronto, Gladiators versus Houston, which would be a really fun match. And then these guys are just going to be in the hunt, but are going to miss out just barely. Could see Chengdu probably is going to finish like 13 and 15 and just be on the outside, which is about what they finished last year. Actually, I think that is exactly what they finished last year. But it might be a bit more competitive this year, as a lot of teams are making moves to really elevate their ceiling. So I think this looks like a pretty good list. Obviously, it's going to change. There's going to be some team that's going to blow our expectations out of the water, and they're going to take off. We're not going to be ready for it. And there's going to be other teams that look really good that just let us down. And that's just impossible to predict. But looking at everything we know now with roster moves and potentially what the meta could be, and if we know anything, this meta is going to stay for a majority of the league until something major happens. If it's a crazy new balance patch or they decide 1-3-2 is the way to go, that'll be the only thing that really shakes in the meta. 2 is not consistent enough to say, 2 seasons in a row isn't consistent enough to say that that's how it's going to be, but that's probably how it's going to be. One meta is probably just going to define a majority of the season, and it's going to be what we're going into now is like Arista Sigma, Mei Hanzo, probably some Pharah, and then probably a lot of Batiste as well. So this is going to be where I'm putting these teams for Season 3, and I'll hold to that. I'll do some more power rankings throughout the season as it adjusts and we get to see some of these teams more. But heading into the season, this is what I feel most confident with. Obviously, it's really hard to tell where teams are going to end up, but just making our best guesses at who the roster is consisting of, who's playing for what, the coach is, what the meta could be. It's really hard to predict how this season's going to go, but I think off of educate guesses is the best I can pull together. This is what looks the most promising to me. So we'll keep doing power rankings as the season goes on. Every few weeks I'll do another one of these videos and we'll try and see where we go from there. If you want to see more content, I'll be posting more Overwatch League stuff on this YouTube channel. You can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/YTSupahFly. We'll start doing VOD reviews and watch-throughs of Overwatch League games once the season starts up, along with live power ranking setting sessions like this on Twitch. So make sure to check that out.